Hi, everyone. This episode, I have a conversation with a titan of the building science world, Joe Lstiburek. Joe needs no introduction, so I will skip that. If by chance you don't know Joe, check out the show notes where I have some information about him. But otherwise, just please dive right into the episode. It's a great conversation. I found it engaging and entertaining and educational, and I had a really good time. So I hope you do too. And without further ado, here is Joe Lstiburek.
All right, very good. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to chat. I've been reading your stuff online and in papers and books and all that for a long time, so I'm really excited.
Well, thank you. I've had a blast over the last half century.
How did you? So this is always an interesting question for people that end up in this kind of field, building science, building enclosures, because I have yet to really meet somebody that knew what it was before they got into it. So I'm curious how you stumbled into this.
Well, what happened was I aerospace engineering degree at the University of Toronto, building science, building physics. 220 of us started, 12 of us graduated. I was at the bottom of the class, but that's rather successful if there are only 12 of us. When I graduated, I couldn't get a job. So I ended up as a laborer on a construction site, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. The joke is when somebody says it's not rocket science, I can actually comment on that because I was a rocket scientist. Now, again, the other irony of this is that my dad ran the controls department at de Havilland Aircraft for a long time, and I grew up around planes. And all I ever wanted to do was be a pilot, but my eyesight sucked so badly I couldn't get a license. And so anyway, Dad retired, but got into building small houses for people. As a teenager, I would end up actually helping Dad. It was more of a way of keeping him busy. You see, he was kind of wild. He built a jet helicopter, one-seater, in our backyard, a machine shop in the garage. Flew it once, and that was it. And then I just grew up with, a wood shop, a machine shop, a crazy dad who I miss terribly, by the way, would build stuff. We'd never buy anything new. It was always second and third hand and broken, and he would fix it. So when I couldn't get a job in aerospace, I ended up in construction, and I got adopted by, believe it or not, the local building officials, because I was always asking, well, why do you do this and whatever? And I didn't view them as enemies. A lot of people hate building officials, but I wanted to talk to them, and they kind of adopted me. And then my questions began to get more complicated, and they sent me off to the National Research Council of Canada, where I met the legends. And that was it, man. That's how I started. My mentors, they're all dead now. My God, I turned 70 two weeks ago. Give me a break. I was always
You're looking great.
I was always the young punk kid. Joseph, you need to go to Cleveland to figure out why all the paint is falling off the walls. Well, Professor Handegard, you already know why all the paint is falling off. Yes, I know, but you need to figure it out. And so I would drive, from my mother's basement, to Cleveland, and I found a non-profit bunch by a guy by the name of Jim LaRue. He passed recently, but Jim LaRue had a radio show called Housebender Makes House Calls on Sunday morning, and so I would guest, and this guy Joe wants to know, has anybody got peeling paint problems? We got a 1,000 letters. I went to see a couple of hundred houses, and the pattern is that they got their walls insulated with cellulose, and the paint fell off. And so it was my first real building science paper, which is called Insulation-Induced Paint and Siding Failures. And that linked energy flow with wetting and drying potentials. And I've been dealing with that yeah, for more than a half century. So, when people say Cleveland sucks, they have no idea. I love Cleveland because it was the start of whatever. And then I started, so remember, I'm living in Toronto, but I'm crossing the border. And
Right.
then I go to Detroit, and I end up at a builders meeting, and this old guy starts talking, and I interrupt him, and I said, you have no idea how to build. And there was I didn't know who he was. There was gasping. And the guy just kind of smiled and laughed. It turned out to be Bill Pulte. He was the largest home builder in the United States. He just forever. He passed recently. As they should. I mean, he teased me forever. And I started doing forensic reviews for all of his projects to keep him out of trouble. And then he shared me with the other production builders. And so, insulting a legend because I didn't know he was a legend, I didn't, and then not getting a job in aerospace and hanging out in Cleveland got me into building science. And then why did I end up in the United States? Well, I ran the research department for the Canadian home builders, and I was put in charge of the art program to build 1,000 ultra energy efficient homes. And I said, look, if we just add insulation to the attics are going to rot. And if we air seal, people are going to die from carbon monoxide poisoning because of the spillage and backdrafting. Well, I was kind of ignored. A family of 4 died in Mississauga, Ontario, the Dima Shells. And I went to testify at the coroner's inquest. And I was told if I testified at the coroner's inquest, I would lose my job. So I testified. I got fired the week my daughter was born, and I got blacklisted. I couldn't work in Canada. So I started working under a nom de plume. So there were reports written by a guy by the name of Lstiburek. And I ended up being hired under the table, and I would do work in the United States. So I ended up in Chicago and discovered jazz, Buddy Guy, and really good food. So I was getting that, not getting much work done, but having a blast. And I would have never moved out of Chicago, but I met a blonde architect in Boston, and that was the end of that. And moved to Boston. But I became an American citizen the old-fashioned way. I came in as an alien of exceptional merit. And so when I married Betsy, she knew that I didn't need to marry her to become legal. I was already legal. I married her for love. And so I've been an American citizen for a long time. I still have my Canadian citizenship, but when people talk about immigration and whatever, man, I've been there. It was complicated and difficult and irritating and but seemingly necessary, and I just struggled through it. Can we make it a little bit more efficient? Yeah, but there's got to be rules. And I'm off topic, but anyway, I'm
There's so many threads there I'd like to follow up on. I've been taking little notes as we go, and I think I want to jump back to the insulting a legend part. And I'm curious, one, how you had the confidence at that stage to so clearly challenge the authority figure, even if you didn't know who he was exactly, somebody who's presenting and speaking, right? So there's sort of some implied authority.
well, I'd already gone through being blacklisted and studying the failures of thousands of houses in Canada. I mean, what could they do to me that hadn't been done already, right? I mean, my wife divorced me and wouldn't let me see my kids and changed their last names. And then it took a while before I was finally able to reestablish contact. But what's kind of neat, my daughter is now a professor of architecture at Virginia Tech, Christine Williamson, and I have 4 grandchildren with her. And my son became a builder developer in Denver. And so he's way more successful than me. He says, Dad, spend all your money. When you run out, I'll put you in a nursing home with a wine list. I got you covered. So
Sounds like a good deal.
so it's kind of neat. So it took a while, but I've reestablished for a long time the contact with my kids, and all of that was good because it tells me how important personal relationships are and whatever. And so what can anybody do to me at this point or time? I would occasionally teach graduate students at the university, and the dean would call me in and she'd complain about, there were complaints, and I would kind of laugh and smile and, just, okay, go away. I mean, snowflakes don't have a sense of humor and they don't understand my jokes. I explained to them that I grew up listening to music on little plastic discs that wrote at 45 RPM, and I listened to Paul McCartney's band Before Wings. They don't understand any of these, and I have a blast with them. And they the ones that are okay kind of sense through it, and I adopt them. I mean, let me explain. I became successful because old legends took time to talk to a young punk kid and treated me nice. Anytime a youngster wants something from me, I will stop everything and respond to them because it's my way of giving back. I would have never become who I was without the old timers, young Joseph. I have a friend who's building apartment buildings with drywall in Edmonton. Go out and visit him. And one of the famous people with PCL Construction, he hates polyethylene. He uses drywall as an air barrier. And he has a license plate that said no poly. Now his name is Jean-Claude Perrault, and he's, Quebecois from the Eastern Townships moving to Edmonton, Alberta, which in itself, and he says he was Mr. Air Barrier. And he had this phrase in French Canadian, cherchez le trou. And he says, that's where the air goes through the wall. And I burst out laughing. And so when I was asked to define air barriers, Professor Gus Handegard says, young Joseph, get 10 sheets of drywall and measure the air leakage of drywall, and that'll define an air barrier. And I could only find 8 sheets of drywall, so the air leakage number for an air barrier material is based on 8 sheets of drywall tested by a young punk Canadian. It was just hysterical. And so, then they said, well, what about an assembly and what about an enclosure? I just took that number and multiplied it by 10 and then multiplied the next number by 10. And that made the Canadian American codes. That's ridiculous. A young punk kid measures 8 sheets of drywall in 1982. I says, look, it was just a freaking guess. It gets even better. So the materials were tested at a positive pressure of 75 pascals. So I was asked to measure 100 houses in Canada to establish a baseline at a positive pressure of 75 pascals. Well, it was freaking cold in December and January, and when we pressurized, we froze the pipes. So I turned the goddamn fan around. That's why we depressurize houses, because it was cold in Canada and Toronto in 1982. Well, why do we do materials at 75 pascals and houses at 50? I didn't have a fan big enough to get to 75 pascals. The original contract was, to pressurize to 75 pascals. So, a couple of months go by, and I'm in Ottawa at the National Research Council of Canada. Professor Handegard Gus is there, and I said, Gus, I got to ask you, where'd the 75 pascals come from? He laughed, he grabs me by the elbow, and he takes me to the corner office of building M40, the head of the National Research Council Division Building Research, and he says, Joe wants to know where the 75 pascals come from. And the head of the division says, I didn't have a fan big enough to get to 100 pascals. So now we have the technology, and so I wanted to say, well, look, we should be testing at 100 pascals and at a positive pressure, because that's what we wanted to do, and that makes the most sense. Do you have any idea the negative responses? Oh, 50 pascals, we've been doing 50 pascals negative for a long time. There's a reason for that. And I said, yeah, my equipment was too small. It was freaking cold. I mean, this is hysterical. So I'm always having fun, finding out where the old rules come from. And you actually find the people, if they're still alive, or the people that knew the people when they were alive, and they tell stories, and it's like, you're kidding. I had no idea. And so on the one hand, the stories are really neat because it helps tell you the education, the evolution. On the other hand, I'm irritated that we can do so much better, but we don't. It's crazy. So one of our famous phrases was build tight, ventilate right, and that came from Canada Mortgage and Housing in 1982, 1983. It was just we took the Swedish building code and divided it by 2. Because we play hockey twice as good as the Swedes, so our houses can be twice as tight. Then we tried to build 1,000, and there's no way that it could be done with a membrane on the inside and had to be drywall. My master's was the airtight drywall approach, simply because we couldn't get it to work with poly. And then it's ridiculous to put it on the inside. So over 30, 40 years, we've learned to have the air barrier on the outside of the structure. And we still argue about that. Why is it on the outside? Well, because it's dumb on the inside. Yeah. Well, it was always on the inside for a reason. Yeah, we were stupid. I'm having a blast. The only change is that I smile a lot. I enjoy it. I don't. I don't have to worry about things anymore. I know it's hard to believe. I mean, I still get irritated because my Leafs failed to win a freaking 67 was the last time they won. I have a T-shirt that says "Once more before I die." Okay, that's the, that's the only thing that irritates the hell out of me yet. But everything else is. I had grandkids. I got all kinds of friends. Some of my enemies have become friends, and it's amazing what happens if you actually, talk to people.
I want to say first on the Leafs, I think there's something to the long-suffering fan that's really where it's at with sports. I think I was a lifelong Red Sox fan, and I still am. But the intensity of my fandom went off a cliff after they won a couple World Series, and it wasn't intentional. It just happened.
No, no,
And kind of the same thing with the Pats. And like it's just I don't know. I didn't exactly enjoy when they were terrible, and they kept flubbing at the last minute. But there's something about that that keeps you hooked, I think. So I don't know. Maybe the Leafs are right where you need them to be.
again, I'm smiling. It was funny. I used to drive from Boston to Toronto for the final Leaf games, in the first series, and I would not actually be in the arena. I'd always be in a restaurant called Barbarians, and we would watch on from the bar. And so I became famous for always sitting in Barbarians with another famous guy, Professor John Straub, and Alex Lukachko, another big dog, Canadian building science, whatever. And we'd be drinking beer, and they'd always lose. So Barbarians has known me for years for just simply doing that. And I didn't go this year, and so they contacted me. Are you mad at us? I said, no, you don't understand. My wife is doing stuff, and I got to be around, and I don't want to give away half my stuff, so I'm sorry. And burst out laughing. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just there. You go.
So still, there's 15 directions I could go, but I think I'm going to go with a lot of one kind of common thread through a lot of what you've been talking about is how there's this knowledge that exists, like you and a few other people know certain things that could create better results in terms of performance and durability and resiliency of buildings and things like that. It's not a secret exactly. It's just maybe not widely distributed. Why do you think that persists? Like, why do you think that dynamic has been consistent for so long?
Well, no, this is real easy. It's not painful enough yet. You see, stupid should hurt, and it should hurt quickly. And we change things when it becomes intolerably bad. We're not proactive, we're reactive. The way I explain it is that, okay, if you're a kid, you put your hand on the stove, oh shit, it hurts right away. The stupid action had a consequence. What would happen if you put your hand on your stove and it didn't hurt for 15 years? All right, so the stupid action and the consequences were a decade or more away. Now, what's been happening is because we've dramatically changed the energy flow by reducing it and dramatically increased the water sensitivity of our materials, the pain is now shrunk to less than 10 years. And why is that important? Well, because guess who's been the most effective technology transfer mechanism in the construction industry? Lawyers, the legal profession. And so nothing changes practice more than litigation, and there are consequences. I hate to say that, the lawyers and the insurance people and the failures are driving innovation, even though the stuff and the failures could have been avoided. It's absolutely remarkable that that's the situation. Now, I became famous for saying a couple of things, and understand that these things I'm going to tell you that I became famous for, I didn't invent them, I just phrased them. I said, number one, it's okay things get wet if they dry. I know I'm legendary. I can't help myself. Whoa, Joe, that's awesome. And then I said, number two, drying requires an exchange of energy. And what have we done to the energy exchange? We've reduced it. So if you want things to last a long time and they're highly insulated, you can't let them get wet because there isn't energy available to dry. Whoa. Then I said, hey, materials have changed. I tell the youngsters, we used to go to places called forests and cut trees down and cut them into boards and build boats out of them and sail them around the world. Try doing that with a sheet of OSB. I call OSB the spam of wood. I call spam the OSB of luncheon meat. I mean, this is, and it gets worse. We used to line the inside of our buildings with plaster. Now we line them with paper-faced gypsum board. We're building paper buildings. Even the dumbest of the three little pigs didn't build his house out of paper. I view engineered wood to be an insult to wood and engineers. What are the odds that we're going to go back to building out of 1,000-year-old trees and rocks and no insulation? Not going to happen. So we have to change the way to compensate for the change of energy and the durability issues with respect to the materials. Now, here's why Winston Churchill is so important. Are you ready for this? Winston Churchill defined America and Americans this way. He said, Americans can always be counted upon to do the right thing after all of the alternatives have been exhausted. And so, we're going through those alternatives. We're figuring it out. Joe, are you happy with OSB? Oh, yeah, but I use it differently than plywood. And I use plywood and OSB differently than boards. Whoa, you're kidding. No, it's okay. Are you happy with paper-faced gypsum board? Oh, yeah, but I use it differently than plaster. Okay, and I say, well, there are only two kinds of windows in the world, windows that leak and windows that will leak. And they've always leaked. But, when they leaked into cavities that were poorly insulated, made out of robust materials, it didn't matter. So we have to basically flash under them. Well, we never did this before. Yeah, I know, we didn't have to. And I said, it gets worse. Windows and people, when we get old, we leak. You youngsters have no freaking idea what's coming to you. And again, that's why they don't let me teach undergraduates anymore. Oh my God, And so, as buildings age, they perform differently. And we have to compensate for that. And we know how to do all of these things. We've not reached the too painful period point. Now, I'm thrilled about California burning down. I'm thrilled about the stupidity in North Carolina. You're not going to believe this, but Houston floods a couple of times, and they keep building where it floods. And now they're figuring out, well, if we're building where it floods, we need to build differently because it floods. Well, it's climate change. No, it's not. There are more people, and we're building stupider things in stupider places. We're going to continue to.
Yes.
They got the order wrong. It should be fire, wind, earth. So you have fire resilience, hurricane and wind resistance, and earthquake resistance, and built out of materials that can handle the stress. And you want to be as energy efficient as freaking possible. We know how to do this, except we've not transferred that information to the people that need to know, which would be who? Well, that would be the architects, be the contractors, that would be the code groups. We're not teaching it anywhere except through the legal profession and failures. That's horrible. That's not the way to do it. Anyway, I'm ranting.
Do you think that is a issue of what we've been doing for, let's say the last, 40 years has been the wrong things? Or are we just still very early in the curve of the knowledge adoption and eventually we'll get there?
Okay, so the people that are really smart now, who are really stupid early, were the Department of Energy weatherization program, low-income weatherization. And believe it or not, they caused paint issues and indoor air quality issues, but they stepped up right away. So it wasn't like in Canada where it took a decade. In the United States, believe it or not, I think the world of the weatherization folks, we figured it out. We're not killing people and we're not rotting their houses anymore. Now, that's the poor people's retrofits. We haven't figured it out with new houses. It flabbergasts me. Then, of course, what do? We export this technology across the Atlantic to Great Britain. And we're going to be net zero by 2030 or whatever. And they have no idea. And their houses and their buildings are rotting. They've got more disasters than you've ever seen before. And my joke is that the only people that are happy are the fire people because the buildings are too wet to burn. It gets even better. We export the technology, the bad technology, across the Pacific. We send it to New Zealand and Australia. and they're rotting like crazy. And I'm saying, look, we could avoid all of these things. But, the activists, let me be careful here, but if you can't do math or physics, become an activist. The activists are basically pushing, oh, you got to do this and save the planet. And I said, yeah, but you don't want to kill the building and kill the people. Yeah, I know. So
Revolutionary idea.
So you don't like energy efficiency and climate, changing for the climate? I says, no. I do. I'm an engineer. As an engineer, I have a genetic defect. It's the efficiency gene. I can't help myself. But I'm an old engineer. And I know that stupid hurts. And so the idea is, can we do all of these things and not kill people and not make them sick, not kill the building and not make the building sick? And the answer is yes, but we're not doing it because it hasn't been painful enough.
It's kind of hard to imagine that with all of the pain that there has been, that it's not enough, right? Like, how do you think we get there? How do you think we go from where we're at now? Is it just a matter of time to go up the curve on the spread of the pain? Do you think we can do things differently as educators or as practitioners? What would you, if you had a magic wand and could make a couple changes that might turn the direction here? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, we need more disasters. Don't look at me like that. I got that look, Well, what do you mean? Well, guess what? California almost burning down is a really big deal. I warned them about it. You shouldn't vent your roofs in a place where you have a wildfire. You shouldn't ventilate the shit out of your walls because of the embers, right?
Do you see that? Do you see that? Have people learned from No.
Not yet, but now they're all of a sudden, oh my God, this was written down like a half century ago. Oh, okay, how come we didn't do it? Because we're not proactive, we're reactive. The pain has to be so great, then we intervene. And now the disaster is in California. Woohoo! Guess what? North Carolina. Yeah! Joe, you're celebrating misery. And I'm saying, yeah, because that means that we're going to intervene and we're not going to have misery later. And so nothing like disasters like they've really changed the way they build in Houston because of what? The flooding. Well, guess what? Katrina, what a screw up. And then they rebuilt it badly. Just ask Brad Pitt about how much fun he's having. But we now figured it out because you have a disaster, we rebuild badly, and now we're repairing. So, I'm not wanting to be negative. I'm actually being very positive because we're on the tail end of the hurt. Does that?
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I certainly hope that's true. And I'm trying to poke a little bit at the idea of that we're at the tail end of the hurt, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because to me, I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence of folks learning from these things.
Well, we're actually beginning to get architects taught building science in architecture programs.
Where's that happening?
Well, Penn State, Virginia Tech with my daughter. Yeah. In Canada, you've got building science fundamental programs in architecture and engineering.
Yep.
The best school is not the one I went to. It's the University of Waterloo. You've got, they're awesome in Vancouver, British Columbia. Well, why? Because they had the Vancouver condo crisis. They went through an absolute freaking disaster and nothing like insane pain to focus the mind. So they went from doing stupid stuff to, hey, that's where you go to learn. And in fact, I'm sucking some of the folks from Vancouver to teach and educate some of our folks simply because they've gotten that good at it. So they went from being an absolute disaster to being magnificent, right? And so anyway,
So architecture seems like a prime, like if you could snap your fingers and make one change that might be broadly effective across a wide range of building types and scenarios, right? Like if you could.
Here goes. The very first year in architecture, you have a class in building environmental separation, material properties, and failure and risk. Right off the bat, the very first one. You're because they got a dozen courses. All I want is one at the very beginning. And what's neat, that's going to then change the way they look at everything else for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. That's awesome. The local AIAs and the local builders associations need to get more active, and they are. And guess what? You got presentations on mold and failure. Why? Because they have lots of mold and failure. And so the professional organizations are stepping up. All right. I'm not intimately involved with any of them. I'm just sitting back and I'm very pleased and proud of what they're doing.
Sure.
They just need to link with the educational institutions. Guess what? High schools, the trade schools. Are you freaking kidding me? To teach the tradesmen how to flash and, fundamental second law of thermodynamics and wow. And we're not doing any of that. We need all kinds of tradespeople. And man, I spend time with the local trade schools. And again, the first year program with the architects. Then when we have engineers, we have, civil engineers and structural engineers and mechanical engineers, they need a class of, fundamental building science. I teach an online class at 16 hours, 4 hour sessions. You don't have to have any degree to understand all of this stuff. Wouldn't it be neat that you give them a 16-hour class? They're, whoa! And all of a sudden,
Okay, so that I know your class. Some of the folks on my team have taken it, and so that exists. It's something that I think you do live every so often, right?
well, every month.
So do you have any ideas about why every architecture program in the country doesn't just make that or something like it part of the program immediately, right? Like it seems like such a low barrier of activation, low cost, low investment,
Well,
and it already exists, so they don't have to make it.
well, okay. And my program is, I think spectacular and the best ever developed by anybody alive. That's a joke. I'm saying that there's
It probably is though, but anyway.
all kinds of people that have this content. It's just that it hasn't been painful enough yet for the schools. And again, dominated by artists, and they don't. Don't get me wrong. I adore beauty and art. Okay, but the beauty in art needs to last a long time and not kill and make people sick. I mean, I have a lot of fun. I mean, um, you know, I've had fun with Frank Gehry and Daniel Libeskind. I mean, they don't know me personally, but they screwed up buildings that I've been involved in fixing. And if you ask me, were those buildings ugly? Hell no, they're beautiful. I mean, I love the Denver Art Museum, but they screwed up the roof design so badly, it is unbelievable. But it's still beautiful. Then you've got the MIT Stata Center, with Frank Gehry, and it's freaking beautiful, but really pathetic water management. So I want to keep the beauty, and I want to add the durability. And the architects don't appreciate this. I'm going to get into trouble. Remember, I'm married to an architect, and my daughter's a professor of architecture. Okay? Maybe we should not record this part. But anyway, the point.
Anything you want to take out after, that's fine.
No,
You
no.
know.
I'm trying to be funny here, but
I gotcha.
you can make beautiful buildings last a long time, and that's what we want. I want a beautiful building to last a long time. You don't have to sacrifice beauty to get fundamental building science performance. The building science performance will be invisible from the beauty perspective. Nobody's going to know. They're going to look the same. I mean, come on, we can do this. And so, I want to be independent and beautiful. And I'm saying, yeah, and I want that independence and beauty to last hundreds of years. Oh, we're on the same side. Yeah, we are. We absolutely are. It's just that that's not the way it's been playing out.
Do you see that working out at least as long as I've been paying attention, the architecture approach, like the way the architecture firm works, the architecture firm handles a certain part of the project themselves. They get some help with the structure. They get some help maybe with MEP. Maybe they get lighting consultants. They have a variety of consultants that help them, right? But there's a certain portion that is architecture, and they do that. Do you foresee the way to better performance consistently being that the architects get better at the building science, or that they get more comfortable bringing on that expertise as a consultant, or some other thing?
Well, there's a revolution happening already under architecture, licensed architects. They're getting sued. And in fact, some of the insurance companies that provide, errors and omission liability require their program, the designs to be reviewed by building enclosure consultants. And this is awesome. And nothing like they've changed because they've had no choice. Excuse me a moment, I have to take this call.
Please.
My wife is flying back from Chicago. She flew out a day earlier. Do you know Kat Klingenberg?
I don't think so.
She's big dog in the American Passive House.
Oh, okay.
Well, she just got a degree and graduation, and Betsy went there. I couldn't go because I was teaching a class yesterday. I think the world of her and Kat, and so that's where when Betsy calls when she's on the road, I don't care who I could be talking to the president. I'm sorry, you have no. This is yeah.
I love that.
Sure.
I love that. I think that's wonderful.
Now I do have a call at 11, so I've got.
Yeah, we can wrap up anytime.
And again, I had no choice on this other. Believe it or not, doing a review with other people to try to keep somebody out of trouble. And the reason I got a call was because the insurance people said, you need this guy here to review the stuff. So there you go.
Fantastic. It's good to see some levers there, I think, that may help push things in the right direction, I guess.
Yes.
So that's encouraging. Okay, great. So we can start to wrap things up, and then you'll have some time. What I think this would be interesting to me. What are, maybe you've already answered this 20 times already, if I think about it. What are some obvious things that most people are missing in the architecture, engineering, construction, building science space?
Water, water, and water. Okay. You think about this for a minute. Buildings don't burn down anymore, despite what people say, because of the Great Fire of London. Remember way back when? That was the first building code because of that. Then we burned Chicago down 100 years ago. The very next year we burned Boston down, but nobody remembers the Great Boston Fire because Boston finished second. Okay, that's a joke. And so we've got a very sophisticated fire control business, and we're competent. Then we've handled structure. Buildings don't fall down. They don't blow away, despite what people say. You ever talk to a structural engineer? They're boring because nothing ever freaking happens. You want to make a structural engineer's day, take him or her to lunch and ask them about moments. Their eyes light up. Finally, somebody's talking to us. The people that have personalities are the architects because everything is screwing up and they're getting blamed for everything else. But you take away fire and structure, and what's left? Water, water vapor, and energy. So, rainwater and groundwater, followed by airflow, followed by vapor diffusion, followed by the material properties that you have to deal with. And then that enclosure affects the air exchange between the inside and the outside, and that impacts the contaminants. And all of a sudden, we never had to worry about that before. That's right, and now we do. And we've been getting the building enclosure and environmental separation wrong for a really long time, but we're turning that around. We're doing a lousy job about indoor air quality, and mostly because we're overventilating the buildings. Overventilating, and that's leading to problems. And I've become famous for saying, dilution is not the solution to indoor pollution. Source control is. You can't build out of stupid stuff. You can't fill your house with stupid stuff. And you shouldn't do stupid stuff in your building. How complicated is this? And people are saying, well, if we just double and triple the ventilation rate, we can do stupid stuff. We can build stuff, fill it with stupid stuff. And I said, no, you can't. And that is a fight or a revolution that is yet to happen. And so, gee, you're an ASHRAE fellow and you're blah, 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 and you write for ASHRAE, and you're telling me that you don't agree with ASHRAE's ventilation rates. And I said, yeah, they're way too high. And they're not effective because any contaminant will overpower your ability to dilute it. What you should be doing is focusing on the source control. And you should ventilate only for people, not for the stuff that people have. And then you educate the people about maybe you shouldn't strip furniture in your living room, and you shouldn't have your marijuana grow operation in your garage unless you suck on the garage. You know what I mean? That's the next fight. So, we're beginning to get our arms around, I think, the energy fight and the durability, but we're not anywhere near on the indoor air quality. That's and everybody's, all you got to do is just double the ventilation rate and put in MERV 13 filters. And I'm saying, no, you don't. That's not where we're going to win. But
All right, last question. So that if people are listening, they're like, I don't want to do stupid stuff. Of course, I want to do smart stuff. Where are a couple places people can go to learn the smart stuff that they should do and the stupid stuff they should avoid?
well, obviously, the greatest website on the planet is ours. Okay, look.
I don't disagree. It's a really good website.
All right, buildingscience.com. I've got 150 building science insights, BSIs. Each one is, 3 or 4 pages, and they cover a particular topic. And then there are references and links if you want to go on more information. Just go there. Nothing is behind a paywall. We actually have about 500 documents posted, and they're free. They're just go there. Every PowerPoint I've ever done is posted. You can download it and whatever. We got an enormous amount of sound bites and videos, for 10 or 15 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, and it's all there. Am I shamelessly promoting our website? And the answer is, well, yeah, because what I want you to do is that'll be the start to then go to other people's websites. I mean, the Forest Products Lab have got great stuff. It's just that filtering, you have to know what question to ask to look for it. In other words, you've got 10,000 documents in their library, and there are like 100 of them that are special. How do you, filter through that? The Department of Energy, the Building America program, their library there, I forget what it's called, is unbelievable. But you need to know what questions to ask, and so you start reading stuff. And to be real blunt, my stuff is more basic than the real detailed physics. I'm trying to be the middleman. I'm trying to say, okay, look, hey folks, I love you. You need to know these things over here. So let me help you get from here to there. But when you get there, the there is really important. And I don't do the there. I'm just doing the get there piece. Does that?
Sure.
I know that sounds
Sure.
weird, but
I gotcha. No, that's great. I both of the Build America page, your website are two that I certainly use heavily, and I agree they're great resources. I think this is a great place to wrap up. I really appreciate you taking some time to chat. I've had a good time, and I hope we can chat again sometime.
well, we'll do. And anytime we're at a conference close, let's have a bourbon, a scotch, and a beer. That's called a hooker. John Lee Hooker. And you're supposed to say, no, that's a Thorogood. Again, that's why they don't let me teach undergraduate. Dr. Lstiburek is having a hooker. No, he's having a John Lee hook. Okay.
Thanks very much, Joe. I appreciate it. Hope we can talk again soon. Take care. Bye.